In my lifetime, I have seen candidates for governors repeatedly raise their voices in rhetoric which divided us and pit the city dweller against the farmer, pit the black man against the white man, the young against the old, the teacher against the student. I've seen them use this rhetoric in an effort to get elected to public office and then capitalize on this same division as soon as they got elected, and then 4 years later the same process came. But I believe that the change which we see now, the fresh winds of change that are going to blow across this state, as the young people and the educators and the businessmen and the good government people in Louisiana and those who have gotten so concerned in the last 2 years are going to make it possible for a person such as I to be elected governor without making the same old deals, without selling the offices to the highest bidder to raise campaign funds, without making the promises to retain the status quo. And
now there is a mood to come together again by the exploited people. It is being called the new populism. The people are out in front of the politicians. What I consider the main issue in this election, nationally, is the big money politician coalition that has been running this country for their benefit virtually since the Republic began. From that coalition, all corruption begins. The influence of big money in elections shapes all our lives in ways we do not suspect, and it operates in sinister permutations upon our future. The influence of big money is a closed political system whereby, with rare exception, only the rich or friends of the rich can obtain high office.
I'm very proud of the attitude and the direction that most of the candidates have taken in this election. I see, however, it deteriorating as most Louisiana campaigns deteriorate in the last weeks into a real bad thing. And being the #1 candidate, naturally I'm the fellow who catches it the most. But take my word for it, you're not going to catch a virgin. I've been had before. They've said everything that they can say about a candidate, and I've been circularized on some of the yellowest paper ever envisioned by the mind of man. I mean this. Let's try in 1972, and as we finish the decade of the 70s, let's try to get together in some meaningful reform for this state.
Property taxes need revision, and I and some of the other candidates have suggested how we can deal with this problem of property tax uniformity. We don't use the word equalization because that's a code word for 100% assessment. You don't have to be an environmentalist to know about the problems of the environment. And so on and on and on, the problems of this state are clear. And those of us who will deal with the issues, I submit to you, friends of the news media, we have been dealing with them. The problem is that in order to really get into the issues, sometimes you need a debate. You need two candidates to match what their solutions are with one another. And with this many candidates in the race, frankly, it's difficult to do.
We're going to get rid of deadheads, and that's costing millions and millions of dollars a year. My type of government is unpopular. It's unpopular certainly with the politicians, and they know that. Now, whether you feel that you want to really get down to business and get your taxes lowered, which I'm going to do, I'm going to lower all the taxes. And the only way you can do it is to run it like a business. There's not another way else you can run it. If you want to play politics, the cost of government's going to go up. We have a candidate here, not mentioning the names tonight. He says, I'll speak out against taxes. But he voted for all of them. And they had a reason. He had a reason. In other words, he had a compromise principle. And that's the only thing. I don't compromise principle. It's either right or it's wrong.
I think it's a desire, a reflection of the people of this state for change, for a new direction for the state, get rid of the politics of the past, political bossism, and go in a new direction. And I think that's what I read into our strong race and to the whole election result.
Well, I think it heralds the end of the old line politician in Louisiana and indeed the South as you look at the returns from other states during the past 2 years. I think it also heralds the advent of reformers, fresh young politicians who want to serve the public interest rather than special interest.
By and large, the campaign issue for the first primary. Now that issue exists no longer. What are the issues for the second primary?
I think really the issues are not so much what needs to be done. Most people, most observers know what needs to be done with the state. The question is who can do it, who can furnish this state the kind of leadership that we need to move this state forward. And I think that it's going to be a contest over who can furnish that leadership.
Which of us, by training, experience, and education, can best translate the promise of reform into the performance itself? And in that area, I think I'm clearly ahead of Senator Johnson.
Last night you suggested that in a debate you might like to discuss your opponent's record. Could you tell us what you have in mind there?
And what I was referring to is I think the voters are going to begin to scrutinize his record. He has been able to run a race unscathed by the criticism or the searchlight of public opinion on his record, because up until now everyone has considered him a real dark horse, and little attention has been paid to where he stood, how he voted, what he has been responsible for. As we move into the second primary and voters begin to see him as a serious challenger, they're going to give further consideration to what he has done and how he stands out. As the front runner in the campaign, my record, everything that I've done, said, or not said, has been criticized and talked about and taken out of context and in some cases downright lied about. And so everything that could be said about me has been said. Very little of what could be said about Johnson has been said.
Yes, I'd like to compare records. I think that's important. Not in a mudslinging sort of way, but action in the past, leadership ability to get things done is important in determining who can furnish the leadership. And I'd like very much to compare records.
And clearly that the people of Louisiana really want to change. You know, going back almost 6 months ago, I was fully aware that people had lost confidence in government. For example, the defeat of the 53 constitutional amendments was a loud and clear statement that they were fed up, that they'd had enough. And I think the defeat of Gremillon and the defeat of so many other incumbents is just indicative that for once and for all, people have had enough and they want integrity in government. They want wise and prudent use of their tax dollars.
Well, now that the public seems to have taken care of that in the first primary, that leaves you and fellow Senator George Rube in the second primary facing each other. What are the issues now?
I think the issue is exactly the same. The question is which candidate will bring determination into office and which candidate has the ability to carry out the campaign promises to try and do right by the people. And I believe the people are going to have to make a gut decision on that and judge for themselves as to who they really believe is going to do the job.
My record as one who is moderate on racial issues, who has tried to move with the black community to help to develop them on the same level that I've worked with all segments of the population, is good. I have a good voting record. I have stood for the things that are important to economic and educational development of black people, because that's what the whole state's about. We need to move all the people in one direction. And certainly there were other candidates who in the first primary may have shared that attitude and that record. I think in this runoff, I'm going to stand head and shoulders in the eyes of the average black person who's aware of my record and my opponent's record.
My record, my public pronouncements for really unifying the state and for giving blacks equal justice and full participation in an honest state government, I think is really what blacks want. I've made it clear that I'm offering no deals or no payoffs or no special privileges to any group. But I don't think that's what blacks want. I think black people want what I think the state of Louisiana needs, and that's for all Louisianians to be Louisianians first, and blacks or North Louisianians or South Louisianians second. I think bringing pride back to this state is as big a challenge as the next governor has. And to bring the pride back, we've got to unify the state.
Do you know of any people who actually might have made the runoff who were eliminated now because of this?
We don't know as yet. I believe you've seen some of the cases around here where there were total wipeouts on certain sections of the machine. 1 or 2 votes cast for a representative, and then the gubernatorial candidate had 400 votes. Well, something is wrong there. The machine stopped functioning at some time early in the morning. Now, in the past, we have never gone to court on this because our policy has been this. Where we have a case where in a representative race, the total vote cast for both candidates would not affect the outcome of the race. It doesn't really matter. But we have some close contests this time, and if we find situations where no votes were registered, but the total vote which could have been cast would make a difference, then we're going to go to court and find out what happens.
Under my cabinet plan, we will have one health department, which will consolidate all the health agencies. We're spending now about $200 million a year on health care services in this state. It's expected that we can save $15 million in administrative and purchasing costs, and we can take this $15 million and plow it back into the charity hospital system. And additionally, a coordinated system would generate additional federal funds in some of the programs that we're now receiving maximum attention from on a national level.
contribute all the job stuff. Maybe I'll get them in.
Say, what was that?
Amazing. Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. Of course, it's still in the balance, but it looks like we're going to make it. And I think we've come a long, long way for the past 3 weeks.
Are you ready to make a victory statement now?
A what?
Victory statement?
No, I think it's too early. I'm just very glad that it's coming out this way, and I certainly hope that we can all get together now and get into the general election and run the same kind of campaign. I just want to say again to all the 10,000 people around the state who volunteered to help us for all those months, how much I appreciate what they've done. To the poll workers and the commissioners and everybody who did such a good job. To the people of this state, to be the governor of this state. And I just can't tell you how proud that makes me and how proud I am for my state and how much I want to make it up to them by showing them the kind of government that they so desperately long for.
The one area that surprised both Senator Johnston and I was the Orleans-Jefferson area. I think he thought, and I know I thought, that I would carry it, not by any huge majority, but I thought I would be ahead of him. Actually, he beat me in both parishes by a slim margin. Neither of us really expected that I would do as well as I did in South Louisiana. I was getting 85, 83, 78, 73% of the votes in those parishes. In areas where we both knew I would run strong, but not nearly that strong, because when you get that kind of a lopsided vote, it's very unusual when you're running against an effective, good candidate such as Senator Johnston was. And the other is in northeast Louisiana, where apparently a coalition of farmers, working men and women, blacks, got together to support me and abandon the traditional northern candidate, since there was no race issue involved.
Congressman. Excuse the court. How's it going? Excuse me.
race is not over yet.
The people had a choice. They could have changed the legislature into a Republican legislature and kept their Republican governor, or vice versa. In both instances, they made the election to get rid of the Republican governor. But I think in both instances, just like in this instance, is because the governor who happened to be running as the Republican just didn't have the ability to lead people. And that's what's creating the problems for my Republican opponent in this case. No experience, no ability to convince people that he's got what it takes to make the difference.
I think this statement by Public Works Director Downs that in Louisiana since 1954, it's been the practice of companies that sell almost every commodity to the state of Louisiana to pay monies to influential people is a very candid insight into the kind of widespread corruption that we've had in this state. And for people to suggest that we should blindly pull the rooster again, in my opinion, means that we're going to get the very same thing we've had before. We're not going to get a real change by simply going blindly that way.
We've traveled close to 40,000 miles. I've made 576 speeches. I have been in 130 different cities and towns shaking hands. I've been to 68 plant gates. I've spoken on 15 of our campuses, a total of 31 talks. I've had 123 television news appearances, a similar number of radio appearances, and incidentally taken off 13 pounds of weight and 3 inches off the waistline. I've been out there campaigning all through this thing. And in my judgment, we developed strength all the way through.
I've been campaigning as hard in the general election as I did prior to the general election because I wanted to get back to the people, to thank them for their help in the Democratic primaries and to ask them to get together because the whole state is involved now. It isn't just a party, either Democrat or Republican. I believe that 1 million people will vote tomorrow. That's a higher number than most people believe. But I think that that number will be voting, and I think that we can count on about 60% of them in the Edwards column. And
I'll be very grateful for that and anxious to get on about the business of doing some things that I've been campaigning on for 12 months now.
I urge you to conduct your hearings within the rules, but as speedily as possible, and hopefully we can get this matter on the floor of the House as soon as possible within the rules, always bearing in mind that our first obligation is to give every interested person, regardless of what side he is on this issue, a full opportunity to be heard, because it is so important, will have such long-range effects on Louisiana and our state government for years ahead, and because it may be our last meaningful opportunity to really grab a chance to confect a new constitution for our state. I want to make sure that we fully expose what we're planning to do to the public, and that we continue to have the kind of public support that I know we have on this day and have had in the preceding months for the concept of a new convention.
The thrust of constitutional revision is to streamline, simplify, modify state government according to a plan put forth by Governor Edwin Edwards. Some state agencies would be retained under that plan, others would be consolidated, and a whole bucketful would be abolished. And as sweeping as that may sound, this legislature is prepared to do just that and justify the reform tag. Bob Krieger, Channel 8 News, Baton Rouge.
I'm very proud of this new legislature, which has moved expeditiously on this important piece of legislation. It isn't my handiwork. It is not totally mine. As all of you know, there are some provisions in here that were added by the Senate, some by the House. There are varying degrees of amendments that were added as the bill moved to final passage, some which I didn't think were best, but I too made accommodation to what developed to be the prevailing interest at the time the bill was moved. What I'm trying to say is this is a real classic example of democracy in action. I say in all sincerity, if there's an honest bone in my body, if there's one thing that I'm convinced of, is that the passage of a 1-cent severance tax is nobody's problem. It's going to be very easy for them to continue to get the markets for the gas. They'll have no trouble at all collecting it from the ultimate consumers. The cost of the increase will not be noticed by Louisiana residents. And by anybody's calculation, it's a reduction of taxes for people in this state. But more than that, we move a long, long step towards that ultimate golden rainbow that we're looking at of solving property tax equalization and 100% assessments. Still some other problems, but if we get this far down the road, I think we will easily be able to solve the rest. I think you recognize the man on the street, the fellow who owns that property, the guy who's concerned about it, and even the fellow who sees the gas escaping day after day by millions of cubic feet every day, for which we're not getting a fair return or getting a fair share for the people of this state. I think they want you to do it. And it is in their name and for their benefit and in that cause that I ask you to join with me in this 10-day session to get it behind us. I think you'll be glad you did. Thank you. Will be able to go to a book somewhere and find out what he can do with state property, automobiles, airplanes, boats, shotguns, alligator hides. I don't care what it is. So operating under a hodgepodge system, trying to make it work and put it together on the basis, of course, that we all know what we're supposed to do and that we are mature people and are supposed to address ourselves properly in that regard, and I shouldn't take advantage of a loose system which maybe permits me to do something but which is obviously not in the public interest. To the extent that I can, I have tried to abide the guidelines. But I think we owe it to people who are in government to show them what they can do, what they're going to get, where they can go, and how they can operate. So that if one of them doesn't do it, we can say, okay, well, partner, there it was, in black and white, you didn't follow it, so goodbye.
What do you feel about the situation right now and the possibilities of putting that building in New Orleans?
Well, I seriously thought of moving the building away. I'm still seriously thinking about it.
Well, to where? I mean, if it's not going to go into New Orleans, possibly, where might it go?
Any city in the South would be proud to have the tallest building in the South, a building of that magnitude. Any city.
Well, why have you now developed this attitude?
Because I think the press in New Orleans was unfair to us. In an editorial they wrote about the governor and myself and, of course, Mr. Johnson.
But I'm not going to let the uninformed editorial of one newspaper change a decision which I know is in the best interest of the city and in the state. After all, we cannot let unsuccessful people who know nothing about these things make those decisions. If so, towns would not grow, areas would not prosper, governments would not work. Those of us who are builders and doers and who are progressive and affirmative rather than negative make the decisions. And
this building is probably going to go up in New Orleans.
Of course, there's no question about that. He's just a little more sensitive about things like that than I am. I'm not.
I didn't want to embarrass either Mr. Johnson or Mr. Vidrine. They had gotten out on a limb indicating that I was going to get involved at a time, and I let them think that because for a while I intended to get involved in it. And it had been very easy for me to have said publicly, and that's the mistake that I made. As I told them privately, look, I'm not going any further with this. I'm not going to buy the stock. I will take no part in it. I'm washing my hands. Now, you criticize me, if you will, for trying to soften the blow as much as possible for them, but that's the other reason.
Well, Governor, you told me in all or rather, Mr. Vidrine told me in your presence that you had 5% of the stock. Why didn't you just say right there to me, as you knew I was getting incorrect information? Why didn't you say to me that you did not have any stock?
Iris, it's hard to stand in the presence of a friend and say, look, he's mistaken, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't yet own the stock. General or to the district attorney, or take it to me.
May we all take our seats, please? I believe there are some areas which are of such overriding social importance and of such concern to enough citizens in the state that it would be proper for you, if you elect in your discretion to consider them, to consider measures non-fiscal in nature at this time. I refer to the question of no-fault insurance, the question of abortion, the question of capital punishment, and possibly some efforts to amend, update, or modernize the laws relating to juvenile correction in the state because of events which have recently occurred.
Governor, are you about to become the Bobby Riggs of Baton Rouge here?
Not I. I'm about as old as Bobby Riggs, but not nearly in his physical condition.
Well, I'm no pro. You know, I'm not going to win any great tennis matches or anything. I strictly want the exercise, and I love it. I realize it's very good exercise. But Edwin doesn't play. Well, he tries.
I'm very pleased to have it. It's going to give Elaine a convenient place to play tennis and give us a chance to use it for crawfish contest and frog jumping contest and lawn parties and dances. So it'll have a great deal of utility other than just simply a tennis court. that same plane, owned not by Family Health, but by Bluebell Corporation, and not at Family Health's expense, and without any relationship at all to Family Health, was a plane that I was in on several other occasions. In each instance, I repeat, Family Health paid no part of the cost of the trip. No Family Health personnel were on or involved in the trip, and it was entirely unrelated to Family Health. It is the same plane, however, but the plane was owned by Bluebell Corporation. When I'm there, I, on occasions, shoot dice. It's the only form of gambling that I care about. I have been there and didn't, because I didn't feel like doing it or felt like it was not, gambling is kind of a psych thing. If you feel good about it, you do it. If you don't, if you're smart, you don't. To further respond to anticipated questions, the first time I went, I won $35 and felt like I had really accomplished something. But I was a young, fledgling lawyer at the time, and $35 was a significant amount of money. In the intervening years, as my net income and net worth increased, my relationship to dollars took on new meaning, so that today a $5,000 figure to a person who has had the consistent, long-time net earnings I've had for a good number of years is not a significant amount of money, although I recognize that everything is substantial, relative. If I were to take all that I ever lost or won from $1 to $2, it would not amount to more or less than a total of $5,000 impact on my net worth over the whole 20-year period that I have gone there. I do not gamble for a living, and nobody makes a living off of me gambling. If I were under fire for that, I would do that, but I'm not under fire for that. And let me make a point clear that has been misrepresented by the press. The Las Vegas situation did not prompt the investigation. I was investigated last year, and will be investigated every year that I'm governor. It's standard procedure. The Las Vegas business, of course, is something that will be looked at, as indeed it should. It's part of their job to look at the whole gamut of a person's financial activities. Now, if I ever come under fire for having accepted illegal campaign contributions or kickbacks or something like that, I would gladly do that.
Doesn't the investigation center around that, the possible misuse of campaign?
Absolutely not, Richard. And again, that's an effort on the part of people like you to misrepresent what it's about. As I said before, you may have remembered 4 or 5 months ago, 5 Democratic governors, the governor of Oklahoma as their spokesman, complained because they were under investigation. They indicated it was politically motivated. I don't feel that way. I think that it's standard for people at my level in politics to be investigated by the Internal Revenue Service. It's just part of the job. Our state has not been known, and with justification for people in public life dressing well. Regretfully, as Mr. Carr has said, many people in public life, and I think we're getting away from it somewhat, have felt like voters did not wish their public officials to dress well, but rather wanted them to dress on a level which indicated that they were on their level insofar as dressing is concerned, unaware of the fact that our job is like their job. It requires the proper clothes. That's one hell of a question. Why?
No, I'm serious. Why is the governor? Why? No, I'm not ashamed at all. Why is the governor? Why is? All right.
shoot.
Because irresponsible people just like you chose to use the rantings of a man who was sick to involve me and other people in what he, in his fantasies, thought was some kind of wrongdoing. That's why I'm
Did you
involved
invite
in
this letter from Dr. Vidrine?
No, sir, I did not.
Do you have any reason to, I mean, it seems strange that a brother would accuse, one brother would accuse another brother of such things.
Well, of course, the first two brothers in the world ended up one murdering the other, so at this late date, 6,000 years later, you can't tell what's going to happen. Necessity to do that. Marion was totally unaware of the source of the funds and has no obligation to try to go back and find out where the money came from. But in order to avoid continued publicity over it, he felt it would be better just to return the money, and as far as I know, he probably has already. I think it's mostly poppycock. It might not be mostly politics, but I don't think there's any weight, merit, or basis whatsoever for any concern. Somebody gets the commission. Why does it necessarily have to follow that if a relative of someone in public life gets the commission that there's something sinister or evil about it? It just doesn't follow, and I think that the public is far more fair-minded about it than most of you in the press are, and are willing not to look at who, but what was done. And if something improper was done, then let's sock it to them.
No matter what the eventual outcome of all the controversy surrounding the Superdome and the Dome staff, Governor Edwards says the immediate effect has been damaging in markets outside of Louisiana that provide vital revenue to the Superdome, revenue necessary for the Dome's survival. Paul Amos, News Scene 8, Baton Rouge.
Period. No equivocation, no ifs, ands, or buts. To look at the Luling disaster. Present.
Well, did any of the money that went to your relative come back to you?
And I got to querying Elaine about where the genesis of certain cash funds that she had spent. She then told me, it must have been in 1974, this being the source of some of the cash that she had spent. We have a letter from Park acknowledging that it was a contribution or a gift made to her and to my two daughters. We furnished that to the IRS. They've known about it for at least 12 months.
You don't see anything unusual about it?
No, I don't see anything unusual about it. That was, you know, had Elaine known how much was in the envelope, I don't think she would have kept it. But by the time she had opened it, he was gone, and so she kept it.
She never mentioned anything to you, so you...
She never said a thing to me about it all those years. I have asked the Attorney General to head up a task force of... No, because I'm not going to embrace the premise that you wallowing in that there was something improper or illegal or immoral about it. There was not. You know, in some categories, a $10 gift is a substantial contribution. This man chose to give her $10,000. He gave me a $900 table after I became governor. People give according to their means and their desires. And as long as there wasn't any effort made on his part to get me to do something in return for it, then it's no problem with me. And he was careful enough to tell Elaine not to even tell me about it, because he knew that under the circumstances at that time and during the campaign, I would have preferred that she not accept it. But my association with him had terminated already. I was no longer an effective member of Congress.
Although the governor says his hands are clean, the matter has and may continue to cause him some problems by those who will always ask whether it was morally or politically right for the governor's wife to receive a $10,000 cash gift from a foreign businessman with political ties, and those who questioned whether or not any of that money was used to aid the governor's campaign. Norman Robinson in Baton Rouge for News Scene 8.
So you don't think it's wrong for a man of your stature to accept gratuities like that?
What gratuities? What, you don't even know what you're talking about. You're asking questions and you don't know what you're talking about. What gratuities?
You didn't accept a plane trip to...
What plane trip? You don't even know what you're talking about. How do you know it was a gratuity? Maybe I paid for it.
Did you?
Maybe somebody else paid for it.
Did you?
I've told you before, it's none of your business. I mean, if you catch me using state funds, then I'll talk to you about it. This particular thing is none of your business. Now, you find something wrong, or find me violating the law, or some impropriety, you find me not doing my job, and I'll talk to you about that. This is a private matter, and I'm not going to talk to you about it. It's none of your business. I think that was very disgraceful that the press would use that kind of language in the public media, and I think the press should be very ashamed of doing so.
Are you ashamed for saying it?
Oh, I use that kind of language in private conversations, but you've never heard me say it over the public media, and I think it's disgraceful that the press in Louisiana, simply because it desires to try to embarrass me, would use that kind of language on the public, in the public media. And you know, that's y'all's business. You go ahead and use it if you want to, and do it. It's your business.
I'll table.
Yes, it's upstairs. It's very pretty. How many of you want to see it?
I want to see it. I don't know how many others I want to see it.
You? I'll give you a tour.
Under EPA, over.
Oh, well, yeah, possibly. I don't know about that. It's very possible that happened. Thompson is a very lavish person and lavishes gifts on people, and it's his style of living. He's a very wealthy man. I understand he's got a $32,000 stereo set in his home in Hong Kong. But I've heard of people from getting damaged because people would spill drinks on it and worried about it.
Governor, do you plan to leave this with the mansion when you leave, or take this with you?
I might be willing to give the $10,000 back, but not the table.
Who's in the habit of spreading a lot of money around campaign?
Inhibit
American businesses from doing business with foreign governments in accordance with...
I mean, you're not going to suggest that my wife and I are not supposed to receive gifts from people. We give gifts, people give us gifts, and we do that all the time. And you can try to make it look as dirty and nasty and as unpolitical as you want to, but you're not going to succeed in doing it. It's a simple matter. We are human beings, and we have private relationships.
Table.
Yes, it's upstairs. It's very pretty. How many of you want to see it?
I want to see it. I don't know how many others I want to see.
You? I'll give you a tour.
Under EPA, over.
Oh, well, yeah, possibly. I don't know about that. It's very possible that happened. Thompson is a very lavish person and lavishes gifts on people, and it's his style of living. He's a very wealthy man. I understand he's got a $32,000 stereo set in his home in Hong Kong. We'll get up here to keep it from getting damaged because people will spill drinks on it and worried about it.
Governor, do you plan to leave this with the mansion when you leave, or take this with you?
I might be willing to give them $10,000 back, but not the state.
Who's in the habit of spreading a lot of money around, campaign to
inhibit American businesses from doing business with foreign governments in accordance with...
I mean, you're not going to suggest that my wife and I are not supposed to receive gifts from people. We give gifts, people give us gifts, and we do that all the time. And you can try to make it look as dirty and nasty and as unpolitical as you want to, but you're not going to succeed in doing it. It's a simple matter. We are human beings, and we have private relationships with people just like everybody else in the world does. And I'm not going to stop living or being a human being because I managed to become governor of a state, and nor will my wife.
Now we know.
Okay. Now you know.
And you don't support legalized gambling?
I'm not.
It's snowing in the mountains. When are you leaving?
Gambling is a bad habit.
Are you and your wife shopping around my house?
For what? Good.
What is the table at the corner?
We'll get up here to keep it from getting damaged because people will spill drinks on it and worried about it.
Governor, do you plan to leave this with the mansion when you leave, or take this with you?
I might be willing to give them $10,000 back, but not the state.
who's in the habit of spreading a lot of money around, campaign to
inhibit American businesses from doing business with foreign governments in accordance with...
I mean, you're not going to suggest that my wife and I are not supposed to receive gifts from people. We give gifts, people give us gifts, and we do that all the time. And you can try to make it look as dirty and nasty and as unpolitical as you want to, but you're not going to succeed in doing it. It's a simple matter. We are human beings, and we have private relationships with people just like everybody else in the world does. And I'm not going to stop living or being a human being because I managed to become governor of a state, and nor will my wife.
Very active in the activities of Taylor, Mr. Fisher, the other parties. This bridge was badly needed, and it's evidence of the high efficiency.
All right, I'll count for you. 1, 2, 3. Go to it. There you go.
There was no conditions, if that's what you're asking. You know, Mr. Park's smarter than that. I mean, you know, he didn't say, here's $10,000 if you vote for Bill, so and so, you know, none of that. You know. But there was a rice sale pending, and of course later on there's meetings that took place in Washington, which I attended, you know, which Mr. Park attended. And the rice sale was consummated, and the sweet potato sale was consummated. with the efforts of Governor Edwards, former Congressman Passman, now Congressman John Brook, Congressman Hebert.
I went through that for 3 years. Nothing he ever said proved to be accurate. Nothing he ever said was verified. We went through all kind of grand jury investigations and press inquiries, and it all turned to naught, just as this will turn to naught. So for the future, I'm denying in advance anything that he says in variance to what I have said. If he ever stumbles on something that I agree with, I'll call you immediately and say, on that issue, I agree with him. Otherwise, don't call me, don't ask for comments, simply close your stories by saying the governor denies the allegation. He lives from day to day without working. He cheats on his income taxes and doesn't get indicted. And, you know, he's got a charmed life. He makes friends with governors. In reincarnation, I want to pray to come back as Clyde Vidrine. People. And I had Camille call. Thank you very much.
Public education, and we've been so successful because we've been able to get education. And the problems that we've had in this state have been historical.
So I do gamble, and that's a fact of life that it's not the only bad habit I have. It is a bad habit, and I do not think that a state government should bottom its needs for revenues based upon the uncertainties of gambling enterprises.
We are a relatively young.
Makes it available to people everywhere in all walks of life the greatest opportunity to seek the best education that his or her talent.
Paul, how you doing?
Fine,
Glad to see you. What's your name? Nice to see you. Yes, sir. I want to talk to him.
Here at the state capitol in his fourth-floor office, Louisiana's first Republican governor since Reconstruction prepares for what promises to be a grueling last 23-day stretch in his re-election bid.
You sure this is correct, that it's 11th and 12th only?
Yes.
There is campaigning to do even in the silent committee halls of the state legislature, where local leaders came to receive federal community development block grant money.
This, of course, is one of the very pleasant duties of being governor of the state of Louisiana, distribution of funds.
The governor has a plane to catch. Today, Treen will stop in northwest and north-central Louisiana.
Hey, how you doing, Gary?
Fine, you?
Glad to see you.
Oh, we had a good night last night.
You know where we're going? Campaigning is necessary if you're going to be in elected office. And there are certain parts of campaigning that I do enjoy. I really do like getting out and around Louisiana. The reason that I do it primarily is because I want to serve in public office. Certainly I would prefer to spend this time working on some ideas and projects that I have for the state.
In Natchitoches, Treen speaks at Northwestern University, breaking ground for a new school, dedicating the nation's first resident high school for gifted and talented juniors and seniors. He condemns the public opinion polls showing him losing the election.
The people of this state are informed we're going to win, and that's all I care about. And let's let the people decide on October 22.
Bye-bye.
While here at Northwestern, Treen took the opportunity to defend his record on what both major candidates agree is a crucial issue in this campaign, spending for education.
Well, I think increased funding is important, and you know, that's one of the areas in which I'm criticized because we've increased spending in Louisiana.
At a Natchitoches woman's home, Treen solicits votes from local blacks.
The governor's campaign schedule brings him to some of the state's smallest towns, like Robeline. Here, about 300 people live.
All you have to do is to pull that lever by number 10 on October the 22nd.
He's a good man. I like him. I like his principles. He's honest.
The field coordinator for this stumping tour from Natchitoches to Manny in neighboring Sabine Parish is area businessman Paul Fleming.
Long hours, hard work.
Thank you, Jimmy, very much.
After an 18-hour day and Shreveport, the governor will return to Baton Rouge by midnight, resting before the next day's trip, a busy stumping tour in the Northeast. Taylor Henry, Channel 4 Eyewitness News, Shreveport.
We're starting a caravan today to tour the entire state of Louisiana, covering 64 parishes and 132 towns and villages and cities in the next 9 days. Part of our effort to bring a message to the people and that there is hope.
By design, the campaign began here in Edwards' hometown. Organizers say Edwards has taken a page from the history books, emulating the late Huey Long, who made personal campaigning a phenomenon in Louisiana. But unlike the Long years, this crowd on this day is curiously small, perhaps about 200 people or so.
What is the difference in campaigning now out to meet the people compared to what happened in 1920?
It's just a different type thing. For instance, when Earl Long would have been here 20 years ago, but Earl Long would have had a dump truck full of watermelons and hams and things of that nature, and given a ham to the oldest lady and the one with the most children, the one who came the farthest. And it was more of a, not a circus atmosphere, it was more an entertainment atmosphere than it is now.
Besides being the first day of squirrel season, Sookie Roy and old-timers like him say most people can see the candidate on television and therefore stay home. But organizers say Edwards insists on the personal contact approach. It is his style of politicking. And those who came were not disappointed. The former governor whipped the crowd into action with his attacks on Governor Dave Treen, again accusing the governor of bankrupting the state and incessant name-calling. In contrast, Edwards says he will not join Treen in the name-calling campaign.
I'm not going to call him any names. He calls me names. I'm saving only one name for him, and that's the night of October 22nd. I'm going to call him ex-governor.
Edwards contends the Treen campaign is desperate because they are way behind in the polls. The former governor alleges that John Cade, Treen's campaign manager, has resorted to using smear tactics in the press.
So I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to have John Cade come back to Alexandria so he can sell you fertilizer, because he's been spreading fertilizer around the state for the past 4 years.
This is an event that has everything. Record albums by Cajun comedian Justin Wilson. They all asked for you. There's also a little political espionage. The Edwards Road Show is being closely monitored by his opponent.
Because there's been too much untruth going around from the Edwards campaign, and we're just here to see that the truth is told to the people out in the parishes as he goes along.
How'd you get a copy of his schedule?
Well, that's just part of our research.
By midnight tonight, the caravan will have made stops in over 9 parishes. Only the beginning of a tour that's expected to cover some 3,000 miles in the air and 1,500 miles on the road. This is Norman Robinson, Channel 4 Eyewitness News of Boyles Parish.
I'm Dave Treen. Nice to see you. You going to be voting on the 22nd of October? Yes. I sure hope you look at my record.
Governor Dave Treen came to the Lafitte Project soliciting votes here from tenants whose Public Housing Association's political arm, NOVA, is endorsing him for re-election. Lafitte is in the legislative district of House member Louis Charbonnet. Of the state's 12 black lawmakers, only Charbonnet is outwardly supporting Treen. The governor came inside apartments seeking votes from tenants like Marie Herbert. For many of the residents, it was their first time ever to see the governor in person.
When was the last time you saw Dave Treen here?
This is my first time seeing him here.
When was the last time Dave Treen was here?
This is my first time seeing him in the project.
When was the last time you saw Dave Treen here?
He have never been here. This is the first time.
When was the last time you were here at Lafitte, Governor?
Oh, I guess I was here several years ago. I don't remember the exact time.
Tenants living at the Lafitte Project for more than 30 years say this was the first time they have ever seen Dave Treen here, and they don't expect that Treen will return. But some say the governor's absence will not influence their decision on which candidate to support. Nova President Crystal Jones says the governor has not turned a deaf ear to public housing tenants.
He did sign 2 bills that really directly affect residents of public housing. One was the readers be trained by the housing authority so they can properly read the check meters, and also that anyone who's evicted will receive a certified letter rather than just a stamped letter on their door.
Nova represents some 20,000 registered voters living in public housing. Taylor Henry, Channel 4 Eyewitness News.
Ladies and gentlemen, your friend, my brother, our ex-governor, Edwin W. Edwards. Let's hear it for him.
It was the perfect media event. People, music, and a flamboyant gubernatorial candidate leading a caravan of motorhomes, cars, and helicopters across the state. Organizers admit it was not so important that issues were discussed, but rather that people were given an opportunity to see and touch Edwin Edwards.
That's the man you're supposed to vote for.
Edwards is as much an entertainer as he is a politician. His rallies more than just a place to hear speeches, but also a place to have a good time. Says one Edwards staffer, people rarely remember what you say, but they most always remember whether you gave them a good time or not. The swing tour was put together by George Fisher, said to be an expert when it comes to logistics. Fisher says the unprecedented 9-day tour, including 90 stops in all 64 parishes, took about 3,000 man-hours to put together. The motorcade began in Avoyles Parish and wound its way across the state, ending up here in Jefferson Parish Sunday evening.
You know something? We're right in Dave Treen's backyard.
By the end, the tour had taken its toll. Edwards suffered from a bout with laryngitis, but the event he called a complete success.
Fantastic. It exceeded my expectations by the wildest of margins. I just cannot say how pleased and proud I am.
Edwards says he plans a survey sometime this week to determine whether the motorcade had any effect on his standings in the polls. This is Norman Robinson, Channel 4 Eyewitness News.
With the dismal failure of this administration, every effort will be to focus attention on other matters rather than on the record. That is predictable, it is understandable, and in Louisiana politics it is acceptable. Unfortunately, Governor Treen disdained my proposal that we conduct this campaign on a higher level, but that is his privilege. I could have saved the cost of these balloons.
So help me God.
So help me God.
What a happy
Those were hard words to swallow for the outgoing governor in 1979. Not since Huey Long had any man taken such a command of the governor's chair and wielded the power that Edwin Edwards had. And now, after 8 years, he was having to leave office as dictated by the Constitution.
There was never really any doubt about Edwards' intentions, because 1 month out of office, this sign went up on Airline Highway right in front of this fashionable blue mansionette, which Edwards and his staff promptly moved into.
Within days, it was almost as if it were business as usual, except this time the business at hand was trying to get back in power. The driveway here at Edwards' office is crammed day and night with big, expensive cars driven by the high rollers of his past administration. All, including Edwards, are waiting for the day that he will be governor again, because
I really believe that I, better than anyone else, that's my belief, I, better than anyone else, can put together the competing interests in Louisiana and help mold the state into one people.
deep in his heart, Edwin Edwards knows that he must somehow turn the public's attention away from the image he has as a free-spending gambler who has won and lost large sums at the crap tables in Las Vegas, and as a womanizer who has been connected with dozens, even scores of women around the state. And last but not least, as a businessman who has invested in countless deals that have come under federal and state scrutiny. You think some people think that you're dishonest?
Oh, absolutely. A number of people, by polls and by my own experience and analysis, based upon unfair suggestions and innuendo, and
such as,
well, Clyde Vidrine's book, for instance, and all of the Times-Picayune stories and Morning Advocate stories, always holding out the possibility of something wrong but never coming up with it, has naturally led people to believe that there, where there's smoke, there's fire, that there may be something to it. But it's something that goes with the territory. Unless you are willing, as Dave Treen is willing, to so cater to the press corps and so insulate yourself from the arena that you never do anything at all that creates any kind of criticism or talk, in which case you get insulated from all that, but at the same time you pay a heavy price. You don't get anything accomplished.
Edwin Edwards admits his hurt and anger over the image the press has presented of Dave Treen since Treen has been governor.
This mantle of righteousness and decency that has been draped around him. And
you're saying he doesn't deserve this?
Oh, no, he deserves it. He doesn't deserve it for the mantle to be quite as heavy as it is.
Edwards points out as an example the fact that Jerome Glazier was appointed a member of the powerful Louisiana Mineral Board on July 7th, 1981, and then 7 days later made a $25,000 contribution to Treen's campaign chest.
Well, he's very loose with the truth.
On tomorrow's report, Dave Treen answers the Jerome Glazier accusation and talks about his term in office and his plans for re-election. This is Bill Elder with cameraman Brian Pukas.
I think people in the press feel like Dave Treen cannot do any harm to anybody, therefore we don't need to really worry that much about it. But he's no more honest and no more decent than I am, but that's not what most people think.
Yesterday, Edwin Edwards brought up an instance in which businessman Jerome Glazier was appointed to the powerful Louisiana Mineral Board on July 7th, 1981. And then 7 days later, Glazier would contribute $25,000 to Dave Treen's campaign chest.
Here we have on the record that Jerome Glazier contributed $25,000 to your campaign and then ends up on the Mineral Board.
Sure. There are people who ended up on the Mineral Board that didn't contribute at all to my campaign. There are people in my cabinet who contributed to my campaign. What you have to be careful of is that you are not giving them a job or a position just because of a contribution, or that you're making any decision, any governmental decision, just because that person was a contributor. And I feel that I have the character and the strength not to let that influence me. In fact, I know that I have that strength.
Those who know Dave Treen say he really thinks that way. Those same insiders say that Dave Treen's problem is that Louisiana simply was not prepared for the decor and businesslike way in which the present governor conducts the state's affairs. After all, there was no Tungsten Park scandal, no one being called before a federal grand jury in New Orleans to answer questions about wrongdoing, no Clyde Vidrine defecting from the inner circle and then telling all in a sensation-packed book, no gambling trips to Las Vegas by the governor, who would later tell his constituents that what he did was his own business. Instead, Treen insiders say, what the voters got was a hard-working governor, sometimes slow in making a decision, sometimes difficult to see because he was wrestling with a problem longer than he should have, and sometimes even dull.
Are you dull? Well, Bill, other people have to make that judgment. That's like asking me, am I good? No, I don't think I'm dull. Ask the news media here at the Capitol that see me in informal occasions and at Christmas parties and things like that. Ask them. Somebody says this, and then other people pick it up. And over and over and over again, it gets repeated. It's a myth.
Have you ever discussed that with him?
Yes, because everybody constantly says, oh, Dave, smile more. And so I said, well, gosh, he's a happy guy. And but that's his nature, too. When he talks about serious things, he doesn't bring in levity in serious situations. He likes to get to the problem and solve it and then have fun later.
Both the governor and his wife say that he will continue to be himself, but try to smile more. So, how will the election turn out?
55, 45. Does that come out right? in Treen favor, naturally.
On tomorrow's report, we learn what the polls say and how the two men feel it will turn out. And we also get a glimpse of what a future debate might sound like.
And it just turned out to be a $125 million boondoggle.
He didn't make a decision at all on certain issues.
This is Bill Elder with cameraman Brian Pukas.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Governor of the State of Louisiana, the Honorable Edwin Edwards. Ladies and gentlemen, the Governor of the State of Louisiana, the Honorable David Treen.
No one knows Dave Treen and Edwin Edwards better than the current legislature in Baton Rouge. After all, the lawmakers had to seek approval from each governor whenever there was important legislation. And without question, all patronage was dispensed from the fourth floor. And those legislators, better than anyone else, were able to judge each man.
Governor Treen has been very, very much issue-minded per se, and has neglected the personal approach. There are times when it's very difficult to get a hold of Governor Treen. There are times, of course, when it's very difficult to get a hold of anyone.
Governor Edwards is kind of laid back with his style, and Governor Treen is very close to the chest. He doesn't let you know all of his shots beforehand.
The former governor is a very charismatic person. There are two different type personalities. Dave Treen will portray, I think, an extremely honest, hard-working type personality, and I think it'll probably work to his advantage.
But it is not the legislature who will elect the next governor. It is the voters. And that decision will come after a series of debates, which might look something like this.
And no one felt alienated. Everyone felt like he or she, it or this group was a part of what was happening in Louisiana.
He didn't make a decision at all on certain issues that were on his desk for 5 or 6 years.
He has transformed the state from one with a $650 million surplus to one that's now facing a $200 million deficit.
Well, he's very loose with the truth in both respects. He didn't leave a $650 million surplus.
I said in 1980, when he was tampering with the state's income taxes, that he was headed to fiscal disaster.
Yes, I did. We cut income taxes.
I said in 1980, when he passed the PIPS program, that it was going to be a boondoggle in education.
That's okay, too. I think it's important that if we're going to give our teachers incremental raises, which we did, that we get something for it.
He could have avoided trying to impose an additional tax on the oil industry.
We have a severance tax of 7 cents that hasn't been raised in many, many, many years. 6 cents add-on would not have discouraged the industry.
Those were issues Edwards and Treen were throwing at each other. But knowing Louisiana politics for what it is, it will probably come down to personalities.
Our personalities represent the difference in our approach to the issues, and I think that's what is the distinction between the two of us.
How did the governor handle a particular problem that he's faced with? Did he handle it at all?
Recent polls showed that Edwin Edwards leads Dave Treen by 17% on one occasion, and even by as much as 20% on another. Now, that's if the election had been held the day of the poll. That, and knowing full well that the Republicans will outspend him, Edwards proposed recently that he and Treen return all campaign funds and simply run on their records.
Because the public is so freshly aware of us as candidates and as public officials.
Treen promptly rejected the proposal and then told why.
It is my intention in the coming months, as part of my campaign, to turn the spotlight of public scrutiny upon your record.
So now the opening shots have been fired. We know that it is going to be a hotly contested race. Despite earlier polls, political experts say it will be an extremely close race. So what do the candidates themselves say about the outcome?
I'll just say 51 or 52% will be fine.
I will be satisfied if we can look at a 52-48 spread, and that's what I'm going to go to bed at night wishing for.
From Baton Rouge, this is Bill Elder with cameraman Brian Pukas.
With Halloween approaching, Trick or Treen said the sign at the Louisiana Superdome. Here, Governor Dave Treen arrived by helicopter. The governor appeared for a New Orleans jazz parade publicizing his bid for re-election. The marchers departed from the Sanger Theater on Canal Street. With police escorts, they paraded downtown.
The parade moved at a brisk pace through the streets of the central business district, the governor flanked by his supporters.
More than 7 months after accepting his Republican Party's nomination for re-election, and with 3 days left till the October 22nd election, the governor showed remarkable energy as he stopped along the way, shaking hands and talking with pedestrians. Later, the governor accused former Governor Edwin Edwards of using smear tactics in his campaign commercials.
As a matter of fact, the Edwards campaign is probably the most flagrantly deceptive campaign in the history of Louisiana, and it's being fueled by a record war chest, far and away the largest ever in the history of Louisiana.
With time running out before the election, the governor's schedule includes at least 1 more day of making phone calls to raise finances and 2 more stumping tours of the state. Taylor Henry, Channel 4 Eyewitness News.
Edwards took time away from a busy telephone schedule to stir the pot here in Cajun country on behalf of himself and his longtime friend, Senator Leonard Chabert. This is one of the few public appearances Edwards will be making prior to election night. He says most of his time is being spent on the phone trying to retire a $3 million campaign debt and making sure his supporters get the vote out election day.
We're expecting a 75% turnout, 1.5 million voters out of 2 million. And that's a pretty large turnout, although I wish it was larger, because I think the larger the vote, the better it would be for me.
Here in Lafourche Parish, for example, Governor Dave Treen received 65% of the vote against Louis Lambert in 1979. So,
Think you can beat Edwin Edwards?
Edwards says it's not a question of whether he will win the race or not, but rather how wide a margin he will win by. Edwards was joined in his campaign against Treen by Senate President Sammy Nunes, Senator Leonard Chabert, and Lieutenant Governor Bobby Freeman, all alleging that 5 times the incumbent governor vetoed bills important to shrimpers and oystermen. Edwards single-handedly pressed forward with his attacks, accusing Treen of drying up the state's surplus and underfunding an education program for teachers known as PIPs.
You know what, teaching the PIPS program? You tell them that I said that Dave Treen's PIP program is underfunded by $20 million. He's too pooped to PIP.
Some 2,000 people jammed the Centroplex here in Galliano to shake hands and chat with Edwards, who is well aware that if he expects to win outright, he must generate this same kind of enthusiasm on Election Day. This is Norman Robinson, Channel 4 Eyewitness News, Galliano.
To illustrate just how cumbersome the law is, the governor-elect and his brother Marion rolled the Edwards Financial Report to the State Ethics Commission office in a wheelbarrow. Inside his office, Edwards told reporters that he intends to take a hard look at the campaign reporting law.
There are page after page after page after page of decent, ordinary working men and women who helped in the campaign and who got a check on election day for $20 for being a poll watcher or a telephone person or who worked in a phone bank. And I hardly think that the public needs to know that kind of information, because certainly that kind of a person is not going to influence public affairs or public decisions.
The governor-elect was reminded that the expenditure aspect of the law he is referring to grew out of the close election in 1979, which resulted in allegations of rampant vote buying.
That's a silly jump to conclusion scenario that people in the wake of the close election in 1979 came to. As a matter of fact, something like 12 or 15 judges looked at that election and opined unanimously that there was no fraud or wrongdoing in the election, and for people thereafter in the wake of that to continue to holler about fraud and corruption in the election was just unfair and improper.
Edwards says he has no problems with the law as it relates to reporting large contributions and major expenditures. In the meantime, the governor-elect owes some $4.4 million to banks and supporters in what is the most expensive governor's race in the history of the state. Edwards having spent $12.6 million, and his opponent, Governor Dave Treen, shelling out a total of $6.4 million in his unsuccessful bid for re-election.